Yeah, yeah, just a minute. Okay. Okay, so today we will start a new topic which is on memory, and we will study this concept in general, right? So, not very much specific to risk architecture. And note that this topic is very important, uh, and then a lot of questions are asked on this topic in interviews, right? So, you just be very attentive in the class. Okay, it is very important topic, and then if you learn now, you don't need to learn it again when you study operating system, because exactly same syllabus with some extensions are there in OS course. Okay, all right. So in interviews, most of the interviewers, if they ask questions on architecture, either they ask on risk or they ask on memory uh, technology, which is both cache memory and memory hierarchy. All right. So let's start. Okay. So this diagram we have already studied, that we have a processor. See, processor can only compute things, but it needs some data and instruction. Instruction tells what to compute or what operations to be done, and then data on which these instructions can work on, right? So we have and these data and instructions, so data and instructions are in the memory. When we use word memory, single word memory, it means the main memory. Okay, which is basically DRAM technology. So DRAM technology is it's a cheaper and easy to manufacture, and capacity can be, like laptops we have 4 GB of RAM. Okay, and then we have processor. Okay, and then we have interface between processor and memory, which is processor memory interface. So we have buses here, right, through which we can read data or write data. Then we have similarly addresses can be sent over the bus here. Okay, all right, and of course we have enable read or write signals that we have seen earlier. Okay, all right, and this is a hierarchy we have studied in the beginning, right, when we studied the great ideas. So one of the great idea was that memory hierarchy that we create, and we see that as we have at the bottom disk drive or mechanical hard disk or hard drive. Then we have now solid state memory, which has become available in last maybe 1 decade. And then on top of this we have random access memory or RAM. RAM is something that we call as main memory or simply memory, because this is in bulk, and bulk in the sense that in GBs, and and on top of that we have cache memory, and then on top of this we have registers. So these are the places where data can be stored or instruction can be stored. All right, so this is all what we have memory in a processor, in a system, computer system. All right, so note that as we move up, then access speed improves. When we say access speed, it means that the delay in reading or time required in reading a byte from CPU. CPU asks for, we have seen in a pipeline, data pipeline or data path, there's a need for accessing data memory and instruction memory. And then it has to match the speed of clock, because within a clock instruction has to be available and at the same time data has to be available. So fastest has to be the closest to the processor, and then fastest is of course the fastest must use the best possible technology, and it has to be small, because the thing, whenever even fast thing is bigger, then it becomes slower. I mean, even what I mean to say is that when you use fastest, that best possible technology, where overall time to access is less. But if we increase the size in gigabit or etc., then even then the access speed becomes higher. So what is done is that the size and speed is both optimized and best possible, such that reading and writing can be done at the speed of processor. Okay. However, you cannot have large memory here, so as we will have to go down, and then we create different levels of caches, and then main memory, and then we have solid state drive and disk drives, right? So the speed, access speed becomes faster as we move up, as well as then the size becomes bigger as we go down. All right. So this we have studied. So in this class, we'll study why do we need cache memory. Of course, you know it by now. Principle of locality, memory hierarchy that exploits locality, and memory access using cache. All right. And just before that, I think very often we see that we use word KB or MB, right? Kilobytes. And so what is K here, right? K can be 1000, that is 10 raised power 3, or it is sometimes we use 2 raised power 10. So there is always a confusion. So so best way is to use, instead of KB, we can write KIB, which means key B, which is actually 2 raised power 10 binary value, right? However, you see in the real world, there are some still, this kind of, this kind of unit, which is SI unit, is still in use. Okay, for example, when you buy a hard drive and they say 1 terabyte, what is tera? Tera is 10 raised power 30 or 2 raised power whatever. I mean, it's in terms of 10 or 2. So for example, 1 kilobyte key byte is 2 raised power 10. So it's 1024. What says, if you buy a hard disk which say 1 KB hard disk is 1000. Okay. So somewhere we use SI unit, otherwise like especially in telecommunication, use SI. And you have to be very careful, if you get an assignment or exam question, it says MB, then you have to ask what is M standing for, 2 raised power or 10 raised power, right? You have to be very clear about it, right? So this is the notation that nowadays most authors start using this notation. Okay, where K, they use KI, MI, etc., right? When they want to use it for 2 raised power. Okay, so now onwards we will try to use KI, MI, but even in this presentation, when you use word K or M, one has to find out whether it's 2 raised 10, base 10 or base 2. Okay, all right. So when you say memory, as we move up, memory has to be faster. What do you mean by that? There are two aspects of fastness, right? The first thing is that access time. How much delay is there when you made a request to read a location and the data is available? Okay, that depends on a lot of things. That depends on how far the memory is from processor, and that's of course less important. Second is the technology of the memory. I mean, memory itself will take time, right? Although it's a semiconductor memory, RAM and caches, but of course, because it can store some data, it has to have a flip-flop. Okay, so it means, or flip-flop equivalent. Okay, so it means that there is some delay. Okay, so fastest, some memories, for example, have just one transistor. Basically, it stores whether charge is there or not there. Okay, all right. So we will not get into technology of memory. But in general, latency defines these two terms are important. Latency is time to access first byte of information. Okay, and second thing is that although you can get first byte of information fast, but it cannot read data simultaneously. Okay, so second thing importance is important. How many number of bytes per second can be delivered? Okay, that's called throughput or bandwidth. Okay, so these two parameters are important. So ideal memory should have low latency and high throughput. Now throughput also depends on what is the bus size, etc., etc., right? So a lot of factors, how many ports are there, bus size, etc., all these things, right? So all right, so these two factors are to be considered when we say memory. And then we have, of course, this point we have already studied. The storage in computer is within processor. We have register files, and generally it's order of 100 bytes. Then main memory, which is DRAM. Okay, it has significantly more memory than registers, and access time is in the order of 50 to 100 nanosecond. Wherein in processor we know that work runs at certain speed. Is okay. Can someone tell me what is the speed of processor? We said we can't go beyond that. Anyone? Or some number?
So maybe around 6 gigahertz.
Yeah, 4 to 6 gigahertz, right? So, while I mean, if you translate that into cycle time, then should be in picosecond. Okay, while this access time is in nanosecond. So we can see the DRAM memory, that's what we call is main memory, is 10 to 100 times slower than the processor speed. Okay, and but DRAM's throughput is good, which is 30 gigabyte per second. Okay, so now your clock is running in a processor, clock is running at fast speed, and each you have created a beautiful pipeline where each instruction can be executed in a clock cycle. However, if the memory is slow, is 1,000 times, 100 times slower, or 1,000 times slower than CPU, then CPU, even to access instruction, it can take 1,000 cycles, and getting data also requires 1,000 cycle, which is unnecessary, which is very bad design. It means that now you can execute one instruction in 1,000 cycles. Okay, uh, so this is not desirable, right? So it means that memory has to match the speed of processor, and that's how we create this hierarchy, right? All right. So, and the reason for that is that Moore's law, because of Moore's law, we know the number of transistors increase, the number of instructions executed per second also increase linearly, almost exponentially, right? Right, and it increased at 55% per year. And where is DRAM technology? Speed, okay, has not increased at that pace. It increases 7% per year. Okay, so you can see that there is a huge gap between the speed of DRAM and processor. Okay, and this grew over time. Okay, so now this, if we have to really take advantage of the processor's high speed, then we have to somehow bridge this gap between speed of processor and the speed of DRAM. Okay, any question? All right. Okay, and hence we have cache in between. All right. So now what we do is that we introduce cache in between. All right. So now processor interfaces with the cache. It I mean, whatever instruction address you want to read from program counter, it it just goes out. But cache, first is looked into the cache, that address, and then if data is available, is read from the cache. All right. So it means that, and the whole design has to be such that the most time what processor want has to be in cache. And that's the overall design philosophy. So whatever processor wants should be available to it in fastest possible way, that's within a clock cycle, and most of it should be available in the cache. All right. Okay. So now let's now you understand this concept, but to visualize it, what actually caches which you use very often in our life. One example is library. Library analogy. When you go to library and you want to sit there for hours and then study, and what do? Suppose you are writing a paper on a topic, you get 5 6 journals, relevant journals, you go to back shelves, okay, and then bring those journals, okay, onto the desk, and then you read those journals, right? Whenever, whatever you want, it's all available, and then they read it, okay. And then one journal, you in 2 3 hours time, you will use several times, right? And use it, put it back, then take another journal from your shelf, use it, put it back, and so on. And if something you is missing that you need, then you go again to the back shelves, okay, and then bring it to your desk, right? So it's like this. You are here in the library, you are sitting here, and then you want to read some journals, and then you go to, here, go to, where the books are or journals are, bring them to your shelf here, okay. So now what happens that now onwards, whenever you want, when books are available, you read it directly, get it directly from here and use it, okay. And if something is missing here, then you go back here and bring it. But note that how much time do you need, because this shelf is just, you can reach it with in few seconds, just close to your desk. I mean, it's actually on your desk, okay. So most of the time your access time is very very low. But if some data is or some journal is missing, then you go to library backside, or the library hall, and then collect it or find it out there. But that takes minutes. Note the difference between milliseconds you are taking or seconds you are taking to you know get the journal on top of, on your desks from which is available on your desk, versus going to main hall, okay. It's 1,000 times more time you will take. All right, same thing we apply here for cache, okay. So most of the time what the processor needs available on cache, then you don't need to go to main memory. If something is not available, then go to the main memory and bring it to cache and use it as long as it's being useful. And if this thing is full and still you want something which is not here in the cache, then go to memory, bring it, and replace something that's here. That's how we do, right? So this is the diagram. This shows cache memory. We have CPU, and then we have in processor or within processor chip a cache memory, okay. Of course, there are, if you have multiple hierarchy of caches, then some level, generally level 1 level 2 are in the processor, level 3 is generally outside the processor. But let's assume right now this single level of cache, then it will be built into chip, okay, processor chip. Now this is put into processor chip because this delay has to be very less. And now when we say this delay, this is nothing but propagation delay. Propagation delay is essentially time required for signal to go from one place to another place, okay. So we want to optimize that, and it has to be very close to the CPU. Okay, any question up to this point? All right, I hope you are understanding it, right? Okay, now let's study in brief what is principle of locality. Okay. Now note that the program accesses only a small portion of full address. Okay, when we say address, it means address space. Okay, so now processor uses very small portion of the program actually. If you look at just program that you have written, most of the time it's in a very small portion, whether it's in the beginning of the program or some part of the program, but it remains within certain number of instructions. Okay. Uh, okay, program access, so it means the program access only small portion of full address space at any instant of time. It means that I mean, it's going to use some set of instruction at certain point in time, right? And that's called spatial, space related locality. You know, instruction 1, instruction 2, instruction 3, instruction 4 will be used most of the time in the program or very often in the program. And if these are repeatedly used, if some instructions are repeatedly used, then the locality is temporal, time related locality. For example, in a loop, while do loop, what we have, we are using set of instruction in each loop. So we have spatial locality, and then repeatedly in time we are using these instructions. Then we have temporal locality also, right? So in general, our program has both spatial locality and temporal locality. Okay? All right. So temporal locality is locality in time, which we say go back to the same book on the desk multiple times, right? So you have brought the book from hall library to your desk. Okay, and then what do? You are using the same thing multiple times. Okay, you're using now, but after few seconds, few minutes, you are using again. After few minutes, you are using it again. So you are using the same book on your desk multiple times. Okay, all right. Uh, so same thing can apply to some instruction or memory which is in cache. So program also uses the same thing multiple times and at different instant of time, right? So that locality is temporal locality. Okay, spatial locality is that is locality in space. When you go to shelves on main hall or library hall, then grab many books which you are likely to use. Okay, or related books, right? If you're writing a paper on, say, computer architecture, then you get journals or books related to computer architecture, right? And then when you're using one, very likely that next book also you are going to use, right? So if a memory location is referenced, a location with nearby addresses will tend to be referenced to. So look at in the loop. Okay, so you're executing instruction one by one. So first instruction you execute in the loop, the second is also going to be used, right? So we can take advantage of both spatial locality and spatial locality and temporal locality. All right. So spatial locality, temporal locality, this diagram says that the same location we are going to use multiple times. So this is with respect to time. Spatial locality says that if I'm going to use this, then very likely I'm going to use this also, right? Same space in memory we are going to use, right? Or next space or following. I mean, contiguous spaces we are going to use. Uh, okay, all right. So these are the two types of locality. Now, if look at this memory reference pattern, where on x-axis we have time and y-axis we have memory address, and then this has been plotted long back, and then you can see that same address is being used here, or all this, right? Something horizontal line, right? So all these are like here, same address is being used in different time period, time instances, then we can call this is because of temporal local. This represents temporal locality. Now, while we see that at take instant of time, say here, something that is being used here, right? I mean, if you look at this area, all these addresses are being used, okay, in that time period. Say, for example, here, it's a small time period. So what does it mean? It means that we have spatial locality. So this represents spatial locality. Is it clear? Is it, are you able to understand? Any doubt? Yes, no, anything?
Sir, can you please tell again the axis is what?
Oh, this is, okay, X is time. This is memory address.
Thank you.
Okay, it's written here, right? So when you say time, it means that when you look at line like this, it means that same memory address is referenced at, you know, different time instances, and which is close to each other, right? Then we can say that there is a temporal locality. In the program, there is a temporal locality. It means same instruction is repeatedly used at different time instances, which is close to each other. Okay, spatial locality is that if instruction is used, and next instruction in sequence is also going to use in terms of space, right? So it means that here this is address, this address. So this address and the next address and the next address, next, they are likely. Now the darkness here shows that you know, they are likely to be used. They are being used. So first is, you know, so there is a spatial locality. All right. So you can see different patterns, memory reference patterns, and you can see this correspond to different, you know, different what do you call that, set of instructions or routines or program behavior, right? For example, this represents a loop. Why does it represent loop? Because this is time, okay, and then this address, right? So different instruction fetches are happening. All right. And you can see scalar addresses is something like this. Same address is accessed in different time period. So you can see there are these kind of patterns do exist. Now, can we exploit this in memory? Why not bring all this, you know, what these instructions which are causing this into the cache, and then, you know what, most of the time you have whatever processor needs is available in cache. All right. So let's give an example, locality example. Look at this loop, which is which says sum is equal to 0, and then the loop, and then change the value of sum. Okay, and then we have variable I is equal to 0 up to I is equal to less than n, and then increase the value of I is typical loop, right? So we can see there are data references. Okay, so for example, sum is being used in each iteration. Okay, and then reference array elements in succession. So array element A1, say starting from 0, so A0, A1, A2 in succession we are using, right? In each iteration. So what kind of locality it represents? Anyone? In first iteration is using A0, some memory. And second iteration A1, second A2. Now note that A0, A1, A2 are in subsequent memory locations, right? So we know that this is spatial locality. Okay, now note that variable sum here, sorry, inside loop. In each loop, each iteration is being used once, right? So so different time instances, variable sum is used, so we know that's temporal locality. Okay. Similarly, instruction references in sequence, you know, first instruction, second instruction, third instruction in sequence will give spatial locality, and cycle through loop repeatedly is giving temporal locality. Okay. So why are we studying all this? We are seeing that what kind of locality in general programs have, and then we can fine tune our cache memory according to that. So we can prefetch certain things, or we can do, we can size cache in such a way that most of the time, whatever we execute is whatever instruction or memory data value data path needs is available. Okay. All right. So we exploit principle of locality in hardware via memory hierarchy. All right. So the whole idea is that create illusion of memory being as fast as possible, okay, and as large as possible. And this we do use creating a hierarchy like this. This is the fastest, okay. This is slowest. This is very small. This is large. Okay, so that's all we do. Okay, and do it very smartly such that whatever processor needs is available. And then if something is not available, bring it from bottom lower layers to higher layer. So if something is not available, bring, and it's available in level 2, and bring it here, and it's and so on, right? All right, so that's all is cache concept, right? And we use sometimes we use the word dollar to represent cache memory, right? All right, so cache memory we know is SRAM memory. Note that main memory is DRAM memory. Okay, so this is SRAM is implemented with the same IC processing technology as CPU, because CPU is made with the best possible technology because speed is important. Similarly, SRAM is made with the best semiconductor technology and best design principles, so that is very fast. And it's integrated on chip. Most, some levels of cache is integrated on chip because it eliminates lengthy delays that we have already discussed. So cache speed then is comparable with processor speed. All right. All right. So this is what the same thing we are repeating several times because this becomes clear. Note that this little difference here, right? Of course, we have not shown here level 3 cache and other layers of memory, but concept is same. Data in level 1 cache is subset of data in L2 cache. So whatever data is available has to be there in L2, has to be there in main memory, has to be there in secondary memory. Secondary memory is nothing but disk drive. Okay, note this point. All right. And then we have, no, I mean, we have to define unit of transfer. Okay, how much a level of memory can transfer to higher level and so on, right? Or in reverse direction. So so processor usually need 4 to 8 bytes. I mean, for example, in our data path, rich data path, we get what? We have load byte also is there, load half word is there, and load word is there, right? So load byte is 8, is 16, is 32 bits, right? So 1 byte, 2 bytes, and 4 bytes. So generally, processor requires only something. Processor will always require something that it needs. Is usually in word size. Okay, while the transfer between L1 and L2 is usually 8 to 32 bytes. It's a bigger block that can transfer because it can transfer a lot more information. And then similarly, between main memory and secondary memory is 16 to 128 bytes. And between secondary memory and main memory is usually 4K bytes or something like that. Okay, and different machines have, this units could be different. It's all design aspects. Okay. All right, any question on this concept?
sir, is it like a bus width between each of these levels?
This is what you repeat, please.
Sir, like a bus width. So something like, are we transferring 40, for example, 4096 bytes at a time between
Yes,
secondary
yes,
and main?
yes. The unit of transfer. So, for example, your processor needs just 1 byte. Okay, and it's not available in L1. So you have to bring it from secondary memory. Do you think that your secondary memory will send only 1 byte to this one and then this will send? Because this is inefficient way, right? Now think of some is processor needing 1 byte and it's not there in L1, then very likely that according to principal it will require 2nd byte, 3rd byte, 4th byte. So all this, so instead of that we can, each, because this is largest, so it can afford to send something upwards which is large in size. Okay, and this is all performance tuning. What is unit of transfer? That depends on, of course, in processor, but all this data, for example 4K, are transferred from secondary memory to main memory, right? So say for example 1 page or 1 block or something like that, and this block here in main memory is 16 to 128 bytes, where block here between L2 and L1 is only 8 to 32 bytes and so on. All right. Okay. So block is unit of transfer between main memory and cache, and also between caches, right? All right. So now we have seen that bigger is slower and smaller is faster. So this is the fastest. Okay, SRAM is fastest, which is cache. DRAM is, you can see the difference between time, okay, and capacity. And hard disk is biggest but slowest. So SRAM is slowest, so it's shortest but fastest, and so on, right? And as we go from hard disk to cache, the cost also goes up, right? The cost here in hard disk is $0.05 per gigabyte. Okay, where in DRAM it is $10 per gigabyte. SRAM is $100 per gigabyte. So you can see that technology that we are using is improving, and the cost is also goes up as you move from hard disk towards SRAM. So we have to optimize now between speed and the cost, and of course size. All right. So SRAM is the fastest in the order of 0.5 nanosecond, and main memory is uses dynamic RAM, which is almost like 10 to 15 nanosecond, right? All right. This we have seen. I'm giving you multiple views because it goes into, you should be able to understand it, right? So this is usually on chip component. Okay. Okay, so we have data path here, then we have register file as a part of data path. Then we have 2 levels of first level cache, which is instruction cache and data cache. And we have seen instruction cache and data need for separate instruction cache and data cache. And this is level 2 cache. Okay. And this design, of course, has only 2 level of caches. And then we have main memory and secondary memory. And the speed in terms of cycles, we can see is it takes, okay, this in terms of cycles as a, oh wow. Usually it takes 1 cycle, 10 cycles, 100 cycles, and whatever, 1 million cycles. Okay, and this is in terms of size, hundreds, 10Ks, megabytes, gigabytes, and terabytes. All right, so this is cost per bit is this highest and this lowest. This is another view of what we have discussed so far. This is another view. In terms of access time, register take 1 cycle, where level 1 will take 2 to 4 cycles. Level 3 will take 10 cycles, sorry, or 2 will take 10 cycles, level 3 will take 40 cycles, and then main memory will take 200 cycles, and so on. Now after this, they have to represent this in seconds because number of cycles will be very large. All right. So we can see same thing here. The capacity reduces as we move up, and then number of cycles go up. Access time increases as we go from top to bottom. Okay, but who manages all this transfer? That's interesting thing, right? Who manages transfer between processor, the data path, and cache? And who manages transfer between one level of cache and next level of cache, and between cache and main memory and secondary memory? Somebody has to manage it, right? Okay, this is what here, I mean, software that you write, when it's compiled, it defines what moves between memory and register, which is nothing but level 1 cache and register. Okay, and then these are managed by cache designers, or sorry, the control program in the cache, right? Or we can say it's in hardware. Okay, and then transfer between main memory and hard disk, okay, is managed by OS. Okay, all right. Okay, now the question is that what is the difference between 3 level of caches? Capacity, of course, is one first difference, then speed is the second difference, right? All right. And what else? Technology is different. I mean, technology for level 1 cache is the best possible technology than level 2 and level 3. Okay. Okay, and note that small memory is faster because sheerly because of size. L1 is made from larger transistor and wider metal tracks. It has higher speed but requires more space and power. All right. So this is the same thing, but you can see that what it shows is that CPU register hold words retrieved from L1 cache. Okay, L1 cache holds cache lines. We note that the word lines, sometimes we use word line, sometimes we use word block. Both are the same. We'll see later that the subtle differences some authors say, but in general blocks and lines are the same, and so on. So what L2 holds data lines retrieved from L3. So basically transfer is this way. And we have seen that whatever is here is subset of something that's here is subset of something here. Something here is subset of what is here, and so on. All right. Okay. Any question? All right. So this again same thing. Who manages transfer? The diagram before we study it says that transfer between register and its memory is by compiler. Cache memory and main memory, the transfer of data is between cache controller or hardware. And then main memory disk is by OS. And there are some other units, TLB, etc., which we'll study later. Okay. So we are here. This is another diagram. Now the question is that when you write a program, do you even have a concept of cache? I mean, do you think about cache? No, you don't think about cache. So cache is invisible. Okay, so cache is invisible to user, right? So basically, if you simply replace this, just connect CPU to memory, or if okay, this is a view that you have. CPU is directly getting data from memory. So this cache thing is usually designed to be made invisible. All right. So you when please go to this page which is given in the bottom. We don't have time today, but you can do it at home. Okay. So what happens now is that CPU sends address, right? Or data path sends address that to memory, either for instruction or for data. Let's assume for instruction, right? And if it's available in, so this is intercepted by cache and it's available, data is returned. Okay, if something that you're reading, CPU reads, wants, say for some instruction is not in the cache, then it's brought from main memory to cache and then supplied to CPU. Okay, now if cache has space available, then data that comes from memory can be kept there. If cache does not have space, then something that's here will be replaced or is evicted or moved back to main memory, and then data, the data, new data that CPU wants will be kept here. Okay, all right. Another few minutes. Well, look at this example. So we have load word T0, 0, T1. Okay. So okay. All right. So we will basically we'll have to look at where the data will be. Okay. So what? Okay. All right. So what I will do is that I will cover it in next time because it's going to take 5 minutes. Do you have time now? How much time we have? You have 10
5
minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. 5 minutes? Okay, all right. So let's try to complete it. So this instruction is that load word T0, 0, T1. So where T1 contains this one. So basically memory at this location, so memory at this address contains what, this number 99. Okay. So in order to execute this instruction, processor issues address this to memory. Okay, so this is the address. So because processor wants to read something from this location, right? The memory reads the word at this location, which is the value 99, and sends 99 to processor. And processor loads this value of 99 to register T0. This all is doing, right? Okay. So now if we have cache in between, then all right, with cache, processor will say, I want to read one something that's at address 12F0. Okay, cache, first it goes to cache because cache is in connected to data path. Now actually some designs it's actually intercepted by cache, but anyway, right now this address goes to cache. Cache checks to see if it has a copy of this address 12F0. If it finds a match, then cache reads 99 and sends it to processor. Okay, if it's a miss, then it sends this address to memory. It means that it does not have the data corresponding to 12F0. Then sends to memory. Memory sends 99 at address this one. It reads the data from this location and sends it to cache. Okay, and the can replaces the word that which stores this address with new 99. Okay, it means that now cache has this data available. Okay, and that corresponding address for this is this one, right? So now if the processor requests for data for this address, next time it can send this data to data path or processor, right? Okay, so all right, so in the process what happens that as soon as memory sends this data to cache memory in turn sends this to processor, and of course next time again if it's a reference, then it can send 99 to the processor, right? And the processor of course will load 99 to register T0. So this is the sequence. Okay, so it means that first, again, data path does not know that it's connected to cache. It sends address, cache reads that address and then finds out data is available or not, If data is available, it returns the data to processor. If data is not available corresponding to that address, then cache requests it from lower levels. So now the lower level here, let's assume is main memory. So main memory reads that data out and sends it to cache. Cache stores it. If cache has space, then it's fine. Other cache does not have space, it creates space for it, stores the data there and sends the data to processor. There's a sequence. All right. Any question?
Yes, sir. I have a query.
Yeah.
Sir, what if like cache requested data from the memory, and we are changing certain changes to the same data at the same address. But sir, the thing is, the access time to the memory is 10 times. Okay.
Yes.
And for the cache, it is like 1 to 2 times.
Yeah. So
Sorry, sir, 10 to 100, sir. 10 to 100.
yeah.
So it's the ratio of 1 to 10. So,
Yeah.
sir, are the changes like we make 10 changes? So the only the final change will go to the memory, or all the 10 changes will go to the memory?
Who is making changes?
The program, like we are.
So in the data path,
Yes, sir.
okay, you have not completed first instruction. How can you go to second instruction, which is making change, right?
Okay, sir.
All right. So we are doing it sequentially, because remember, it's just, very good question, but you'll have to remember von Neumann architecture here. I mean, of course, your question is valid if you are doing multi-processor architecture and they are sharing same memory space, and every processor is trying to read or write there. Right? However, in this case, we need to optimize it. You are right. If there's a cache miss, there is a penalty. Okay, say 100 cycles wait it has to do. The question is that is what is processor going to do during these 100 cycles? Is it, or this question will be answered to you in your OS course. Okay, if something is program stops, it can swap the program out, brings different program in, and start execution, right? The 100 cycle is just too long for processor to wait, or something it needs to do. Okay, all right, but your question is good, and I hope. So usually, I mean, just think of von Neumann architecture and get the answer. All right, any other question? All right, okay, thank you very much. We will have a class tomorrow and it will be of 2 hours, right? So because we need to finish course and we are going very slow. In fact, I couldn't cover all that I wanted to cover in this class. Request you to come prepared for 2-hour class, and we'll try to finish the course as early as possible. However, these are very important concepts. I don't want to rush through all these, right? So please go through these slide sets again, because it's a very important part of your course. And if you have any difficulty in understanding, please let me know in the next class, or just send me an email. And I request you to please read books, because when you get different perspective when you read books. All right. Okay. Thank you.